Let's turn our attention now to deductive inferences. Remember that we characterized inferences generally as psychological processes that take information that's explicit and available to that process and transform that information to generate new information that is explicit and available for adaptive behavioral responses, for input to other processes, or to be stored in memory. Deductive inferences specifically differ from inductive inferences, the other major category of inferences, because deductive inferences operate within the things that absolutely positively have to be true given what an individual reasoner knows. And so we characterize deductive inferences using this graphic. We said, in this circle are all the things that absolutely have to be true given what a reasoner knows. Now, within that large circle of everything that has to be true, not what they know, but everything that has to be true given what they know, there are two different subsets or groups. There is the information that's explicit and available to the reasoner, the things that they believe or know, the information that they can utilize for the purposes of inferences and decision making. The rest of the information in this total truth circle is things that have to be true, but that are implicit and unavailable to the reasoner at that time. Deductive inferences operate by taking that explicit and available information that the reasoner has and transforming that information to render other things within this circle of things that have to be true explicit and available to the reasoner for the purposes of adaptive responses, using it as input for another process or storing it to memory. In further characterizing the nature of deductive inferences, we noted that deductive inferences have this dual aspect to them of the underlying structural relationships between content elements and the content elements. And I'll just playfully give you the mnemonic device of Tommy the Two-Headed Turtle to keep you thinking about the fact that these have two different components to them, these deductive inferences. So remember that I explained that deductive inferences operate to optimize truth across that inferential transformation, such that given the truth of the initial information and a good deductive inference, the resulting information from the inferential transformation will also be guaranteed to be true. So deductive inferences work to preserve or optimize truth across that information transformation. As a result, deductive inferences are only going to reveal things that already have to be guaranteed to be true, given the truth of their initial information. And so in one sense, they don't really increase a reasoner's stock of truths. That is, the circle of things that has to be true is not enlarged as a result of a deductive inference. There's merely more things that are rendered explicit within that circle. And so we said that deductive inferences, because they must reveal only what's true, given the truth of the things that the reasoner believes or knows already, they are non-amplitive inferences. But that doesn't mean that they are trivial or unimportant or in any way less necessary and important than inductive inferences, because while deductive inferences don't increase the reasoner's stock of truths, what they do is they make truths that are implicit in what the reasoner knows explicit and hence potentially available for a behavioral response or as input to other processes or to be stored in memory. So they, in some sense, really do add to the reasoner's stock of truths by adding to the things that are explicit and available for the purposes of inferencing, decision-making, adaptive responses, and so on. In order to accomplish this goal of preserving truth across the inferential transformation, deductive inferences really combine two components. On the one hand, there is this underlying structural relationship between individual content elements in a deductive inference. And that structural relationship proves essential to the preservation of truth across the inferential transformation. On the other hand, we have the content of the particular truths that comprise the initial information and the information that gets generated through the inferential transformation. So that deductive arguments really have two elements. Both elements have to be present and aligned in order for deductive inference to be effective. They have to have that good underlying form, that abstract relationship between content elements, and they have to have good truth. They have to have good initial information in order to generate good information through the inferential transformation. However, what we discovered is that in System 1 inference strategies, native human deductive inferences are heavily contextualized, as are all System 1 inference strategies. That is, they're heavily driven by information about the content and the context in which a particular inference problem is presented. And as a result, what we'll discover is that humans will make systematic errors whenever the content and context, the stuff that's salient, important, and that drives human deductive inferences is orthogonal to, doesn't accurately reflect, or is consistent with that underlying content-free abstract logical form. Indeed, it's this bifurcation of good deductive inference between form and content that we see emerge as a potential difficulty for System 1 intuitive deductive inferences during that period of 4.4 to 7 million years of human and proto-human evolution. And recall that during this period, almost the entire time, up until maybe 10 or 12,000 years ago, humans and proto-humans lived a hunter-gatherer existence in which they didn't live for a very long period of time. They didn't have a lot of information or technological advancement during their lifetimes. And they didn't travel very far from where they were born. Their existence was largely one of reacting to their environment, largely one in which they would expend 1,000 calories to get 1,000 calories. And so, given the nature of their existence, hand-to-mouth existence, and since that environment that they are solving problems in remains stable, homogeneous, and small during a given hunter-gatherer's lifetime, their inferences are largely reactions to specific problems at hand. That is, their inferences need to work with the specific content and context in which they're trying to solve a particular problem. And their inferences are going to be largely reactive, relatively simple, concrete problem solving that's linked to specific contents, problems, and context situations. And so it's not surprising then that we see System 1 inference strategies being highly contextualized. When we combine that high level of contextualization in System 1 inference strategies with this rather limited capacity in working memory, that has important implications for our ability to make and evaluate deductive inferences using our native inferential capacities, as we'll see in the next lecture module.